The storm rolled in just as the eviction notice did. Daniel Carter stood at the front door of his tiny two-bedroom apartment, the pink slip flapping in the wind, the ink smudged by rain. Behind him, his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, clutched her teddy bear and asked with wide, innocent eyes, "Are we going to be okay, Daddy?" Daniel knelt, heart heavy but smile unwavering. "Of course, sweetheart. We always figure things out, don't we?" But he didn't know how. A once thriving carpenter, Daniel had lost his small business 2 years ago during the economic downturn. Since then, it had been a string of odd jobs, food stamps, and quiet sacrifices. His resume had gaps. His savings were gone. But his spirit, that, somehow, was still intact. He dropped Lily off at school the next morning with a kiss and a promise that he'd find a way. He always did. Then he sat in his beat-up truck, searching online for anything that might pay enough to buy time. That's when he saw it. Looking for a charming, respectable man to accompany me to a destination wedding. Must be good with conversation, appear confident, and be great with kids. All expenses paid plus generous compensation. No funny business. Just a date for show. It was bizarre. Like something out of a movie. But it paid $5,000. And he had nothing to lose. 2 days later, Manhattan, New York. Dan stood nervously in the marble lobby of one of the city's tallest buildings, wearing a thrift store suit and scuffed shoes polished to a shine. He held his breath as the elevator dinged open, revealing a world he hadn't touched in years, glass walls, designer heels clicking, and espresso machines hissing in the background. "Daniel Carter?" a voice asked. He turned to see her. Tall, elegant, and commanding. Her eyes were cool blue, sharp with intelligence, and her posture didn't bend for anyone. This was a woman who didn't wait for things, she made them happen. "I'm Charlotte Hale," she said, extending a manicured hand. She was the CEO of Hale Innovations, one of the most successful female-founded tech firms in the country. He recognized her from Forbes. And here she was, hiring him to be her date. The reason? "I need someone believable. Someone who doesn't reek of ambition or try to leverage being seen with me. My family, they're judgmental. Obnoxious, even. I'm expected to show up to my sister's wedding with someone who screams stability without screaming fake." Dan chuckled, "So, you want a poor guy to fake being your stable boyfriend?" She smirked. "You're a single father. That already puts you leagues ahead of the Wall Street creeps I usually date." And just like that, he was hired. The wedding weekend, Lake Como, Italy. The sun dipped low over the Italian hills as Daniel and Charlotte walked into the opulent villa. Her hand slipped into his naturally, as if they'd done it 1,000 times. Guests turned to stare, some with raised brows. He could feel their judgment. But Charlotte walked beside him proudly. What began as awkward, scripted chemistry soon transformed into something surprisingly real. Charlotte noticed how gently Dan spoke to Lily over FaceTime, asking about her science fair project. She noticed how he pulled out her chair without being performative. How he asked questions, really listened, and didn't treat her success as emasculating. On the second night, as they danced under twinkling lights by the lake, she whispered, "You're different." Dan smiled. That's what broke people usually are. But there was no pity in her eyes. Just admiration. And something else, something softer. What she didn't know. Charlotte had grown up with everything. Private schools, nannies, elite internships. But her relationships? Transactional. People wanted her name, her wealth, or her influence. But Dan didn't want anything. Not even this gig. He was here for his daughter. That was his only motive. And that, ironically, made her want him more. A twist in the tale. During brunch on the final day, Charlotte's ex-fiancé showed up, unexpected and uninvited. Rich, arrogant, and clearly eager to win her back now that she was more successful than when he left her. He sneered at Dan, "So this is the new guy. What does he do? Park your car." Before Dan could respond, Charlotte rose to her full, formidable height. "He's the kind of man who knows how to love and raise a daughter with respect. The kind who wouldn't leave someone just because they out-earned him." The ex scowled and stormed off. Dan was stunned. Not by the insult, but by her defense. Something had changed. And not just in her. Later that evening, on a quiet walk near the lake, Charlotte confessed, "You were supposed to be pretend. But I haven't been pretending at all." Dan looked at her, vulnerable now. "I'm just a guy trying to give his daughter a better life. I don't belong in your world." She stepped closer, gently touching his cheek. "Then maybe my world needs to change." Back in New York. They parted ways with a mutual promise, no pressure, no fairy tale expectations. Just honesty. But the goodbye felt heavier than either admitted. Weeks passed. Dan returned to job hunting, apartment hunting, and raising Lily. Then, one day, an envelope arrived. Inside was an offer letter, from Hale Innovations. It wasn't a charity gift. It was a genuine job offer, facilities manager. Solid pay. Health benefits. A note from Charlotte read. "No favors. Just one good person recognizing another. Come build something with me." Months later. Dan thrived. His confidence returned. He was stable again. Lily was thriving in school. And Charlotte? She started showing up more. First for random checks, then for lunches, and finally, for weekend dinners with Lily. Their connection grew, slow, unforced, deeply rooted in trust and reality. One rainy evening, as Dan helped her fix a leaking pipe in her townhouse, she looked at him with teary eyes and said, "All my life, I've been looking for someone who'd stand with me, not behind me or in front. Just beside." Dan took her hand, heart full. "That's all I've ever wanted too." The heartfelt climax. On a spring afternoon in Central Park, Lily ran ahead chasing a butterfly while Dan and Charlotte strolled behind. He stopped, turned to her, and said, "You know, I thought I was hired for one weekend. But that weekend gave me everything I'd lost: dignity, hope, purpose." Charlotte squeezed his hand. "You gave me what I never had, real love, unpolished and unconditional." 1 year later. They stood in front of a small group of loved ones, Lily front and center in a flower girl dress, as Dan and Charlotte exchanged vows. Not because she needed a date. Not because he needed money. But because two very different people met in a moment of desperation and found something stronger than either expected, love that was patient, resilient, and real.